You ever notice how some people, they carry their past like a heavy backpack? You can see it in their posture, the way their shoulders slump under the weight of things long gone. And yet there are others, those who seem to float, untouched, moving freely through life, as if gravity itself had less of a hold on them. What if you could be that light? What if you could let go of the old stories, the ones that bind you, the ones that whisper doubts into your mind when no one else is listening? Because here's the thing, the past isn't holding on to you, you're holding on to it. And when you realise that, something shifts. You feel it, don't you? That small click in the mind, the understanding that what you thought was a chain, it was only a thought. And thoughts can change. Like a river carving new paths through stone, your mind shapes your reality. What if, just for a moment, you allowed yourself to believe that you are already free? Isn't it fascinating, the way the mind works? The way you can focus on something and suddenly, that's all you see. Like when you learn a new word and then magically, it appears everywhere. And maybe now, as you think about that, you begin to notice how freedom, it's always been waiting for you. Because the more you try to hold on, the more it slips away. The more you try to force control, the more out of control you feel. And yet the moment you release, the moment you breathe, the moment you let go, everything shifts. And maybe you've already begun to realise that slowing down, breathing deep, allowing the mind to open, it actually makes you faster, sharper, more powerful. Like an archer pulling back the bow. The further you relax, the greater your reach. And as you hear these words, as your unconscious mind absorbs them effortlessly, like a sponge soaking in warm water, you might start to wonder, what would it feel like to step into the most powerful version of yourself? Isn't it interesting how easily change can happen when you think about it? And have you ever noticed how the mind plays tricks? How the past sneaks up like a shadow, whispering old stories as if they still matter. But here's something interesting. What happens when you stop listening? When you turn your head just slightly and the shadow moves? Because you already know, don't you, that the past is not a prison. It's a movie that you can stop watching any time. And the moment you realise that, something shifts inside. You feel it now, don't you? That subtle untangling, that quiet click in your mind. Like a lock opening, like a chain slipping from your wrist. And what if, just for a moment, you imagine how it would feel if none of it ever had power over you again? Because the truth is, every time you replay that old scene, you tie yourself to it. Every time you relive it, you breathe life into it. But when you step back, when you just let it go, it dissolves, like mist in the morning sun, like a dream that fades the moment you wake up. And now you're waking up. Because it's funny, isn't it? How something can seem so real until it's not. Like when you wake from a dream and realise none of it was ever really there. And as you think about that now, maybe you start to notice how easy it is to release. Because forgiveness, it isn't about them. It never was. It's about freeing yourself. It's about unlocking that door and stepping into something lighter, something freer, something that's been waiting for you this whole time. And isn't it fascinating how the more you let go, the further you can go, like a hot air balloon, rising the moment you drop the weight. And the more you think about that now, the more you start to feel it, don't you? That shift inside, that new sense of lightness, that deep, undeniable knowing that you're free. And you always were, because when you change the way you see the past itself changes. And maybe now you're already beginning to notice how different everything feels, how much power you really have. And I wonder what happens next when you step into this freedom completely. What do you think? Have you ever wondered what happens when you just stop? Stop holding on. Stop fighting. Stop carrying the weight of things that no longer serve you. Because it's fascinating, isn't it? The way the mind grips onto stories, repeating them like an old record, even when the music no longer moves you. But what if you could just lift the needle? What if you could simply walk away from the soundtrack of the past and step into a brand new song? Because the moment you realise that holding on to the past is like gripping a rope that's burning your hands, something shifts. The moment you decide to just let go. Feel that sudden lightness, like standing at the edge of something vast, feeling the wind move through you, knowing you could step forward and trust that something greater is waiting. Because the past, it isn't a chain, it's a door. And every time you replay it, you keep that door locked. But the moment you step back, the moment you shift your focus, the lock clicks open. And what's on the other side? Something lighter, something freer, something you've always known deep down was yours. Because forgiveness, it isn't about them. It never was. Forgiveness, it's about space. It's about clearing the path so you can move forward. It's about removing the weight so you can rise higher. And as you begin to notice this feeling now, as something inside you starts to loosen, shift, change, you might even wonder, how much lighter could you feel if you allowed yourself to fully step into this new reality? And isn't it interesting how easily change happens when you stop resisting it? Because the truth is, you were never stuck. You were never trapped. You were simply listening to an old story that no longer applies. And now that you see it for what it is, you're free. Free to rewrite it. Free to step beyond it. Free to create something entirely new. And as you step forward now, noticing how different the world looks when you see through fresh eyes, you might begin to wonder, what's possible now? What do you think? Because it's funny, isn't it, how the mind holds on to things, like gripping a rope, longer after the need to hold on is past. But have you ever noticed that the tighter you cling, the more you feel trapped? And yet the moment you loosen your grip, something shifts. Because it's not the past that holds on to you. It's you holding on to the past. And what happens when you simply release? Feel that opening, that space. Like the first deep breath after being underwater for too long. Like stepping into sunlight after standing in the shade. Like realizing that freedom, it was never outside you. It was always right here. And now that you see it, now that you feel it, now that something inside you is already shifting, unfolding, expanding, you begin to understand, don't you, that forgiveness, it isn't weakness, it's power. It's choosing to reclaim your energy, to redirect your focus, to step forward with lightness that others can't help but notice. Because the past, it's only real when you give it life. And if you can create that, then imagine what else you can create. A new story, a new frame, a new way of seeing. Because what if, just for a moment, you imagined every past experience, every challenge, every setback, every so-called mistake wasn't something that happened to you, but something that happened for you? What if the very things you once saw as obstacles were actually stepping stones? And the moment you begin to see it that way, something clicks. Because the truth is, you were never broken. You were never behind. You were never less than. You were always growing, always evolving, always stepping into the next, greater version of yourself. And isn't it fascinating how the more you release, the further you rise? Like a balloon letting go of weight. Like an eagle catching the wind. Like stepping into the fullness of who you are always meant to be. And as you notice how this feels now, that lightness, that clarity, that shift in perception that changes everything, you might even start to wonder, if all of this is possible now, then what else? What do you think?